Welcome to Pixels. I'm Beth Bilo, and I am super excited to welcome you to this conversation that I had with John Barclay. John is an award-winning freelance photographer based in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. He is a passionate photographer, enthusiastic workshop leader, and inspirational speaker, as you will hear throughout this conversation. It was wide-ranging, and I found myself extremely inspired. He's presented programs to audiences all around the world. His work has been published in a number of books and magazines, including the highly esteemed Lenswork Magazine, and it's treasured by a number of private collectors. Recently, John was published in Lenswork Magazine and the recipient of an Excellence Award from B&W Magazine. You can learn more about John and his work and view his workshop schedule at barclayphoto.com. He also wanted us to know that he's just added another Death Valley workshop for January of 2025. And his co-leader, again, will be Cole Thompson, who makes an appearance by proxy, I suppose, several times during the conversation that I had with John. And so you can find out more. I will include a link in the description below, but please do check that out, because I think after you listen to this conversation, you'll be like me and just like really wanting to spend some quality time with John and Cole and getting to know them and how that can deepen your own craft. So I really hope that you enjoy this conversation. It's really wide ranging, and we talk about everything from what it means to be a photographer, what it means to be an artist, how we relate to our work and how it's received by others, and even a little bit about John's parallel passion for music and how that intersects with his photography. As always, I am extremely grateful to Nature Photography Classes and their Inspired Creator Grant for making this channel possible. You can learn more and submit your own application for a grant at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspired-creator. And the link to that will be below in the description. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please do share in the comments what resonates with you. And where would you like to add your voice to this conversation? Your own experience and perspective. We would love to hear from you. And please, if you like this episode, please like and share. And I invite you to subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. Thanks again for spending time with us, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, John. I am so delighted to be chatting with you.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's clear, Beth. I've looked at some of the others that I've seen that you're interviewing, and you needed an old person to fill in just for all the younger people. I love all these younger people, but I said to my wife, she says, why is she interviewing you? And I was like, yeah, I don't know. And then I saw the list and I said, it's because I'm the old guy.
Well, I like to think of the old guy as the elder, the wise elder.
The wise one. Well, we'll see by the end of this hour together.
So no high bar there to pass. Okay. So no pressure.
Thank you. I love having these kind of conversations, and I love what you're doing with this channel here. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this all grows for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Me too. So let's dive in. I want to start with a very basic question. And I have to admit, this question was inspired by watching an Out of Chicago live webinar panel that you did with Cole Thompson and Brooks Jensen.
Uh-huh.
And it was around photographer artists, which we will get to in a moment. But I want to start out with, why do you use a camera to express yourself?
That's a really good question. And, it's a question, Beth, that I find as I teach and lead workshops that a lot of people haven't really given enough thought to. And I think it's a critical one. Mm-hmm. To me, it goes right along with the question of, why do I photograph, right? And I think that's really essentially what you're asking. Why do I use a camera to be creative? Mm-hmm. To me is somewhat synonymous with, why do I photograph? And for me, it's simple, because I've given a lot of thought to that. And ultimately, I photograph because it feeds my soul. So to me, it's not that, this idea of going out and making images to share with the world. that's not nearly as important to me as the process and the connection I have, because I have, and I don't have a camera sitting right here, but a camera in my hand allows me to connect with the world in whatever subject matter that is in a very different way than if I don't have a camera in my hand. So to me, I must photograph. I'm
Mm-hmm.
constantly driving my children nuts because I'll call them or text them, I guess nowadays, and say, "Did you look outside? It's, the quality of the light right now is outstanding, or the sky is beautiful, or what have you." And so a camera allows me to be creative, but because it's connecting me in a way to be more present than I would probably be without that camera.
What do you find that you point your camera at that is most soul feeding? Maybe that's not a fair question, but what?
No, that's good. And I think that's going to depend on where I am at that moment in time. But if you know anything about me, one of my favorite phrases is photograph what makes your heart sing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and so as I teach, my intention is to try to get people to pay attention and photograph what makes their heart sing, and think about, maybe for the first time, what is it that you're being drawn to? What is
Yes.
it that's catching your attention, making you say, wow, turning your head, a moment of perception, what have you? So that's what I'm being drawn to. And I don't know if I can put say it's this. It could be my grandchildren one day. It could be shapes that allow me to, or inspire me to want to photograph in black and white. And generally that's
Mm-hmm.
graphic design for me, that I want to
Mm-hmm.
take away color, because it's not helping me to express what I'm being drawn to in that moment. So oftentimes black and white is because I'm being drawn to or falling in love with, or feeding my soul with just the graphic nature of that tree or of that building or what have you. So it's going to
Mm-hmm.
depend on, and I try to just be open to being taken. And that's
Mm.
something that I love to talk about. And you talk about shifting moments in time. One of my major ones was realizing that we don't take pictures at all. I think the process is very different. The process is we are first taken by something.
Mm. Mm.
And then it's our responsibility to determine what is that I'm being taken by. And so the second part of that for me is to say, is it light, shadow, rhythm, texture, grace, sadness, happiness, whatever, right? So what am
Mm-hmm.
I being taken by? And now make an image that represents that.
Oh, I love that framing of that. And what came up for me as you were sharing that is, what takes me is where my logical brain is hijacked. Like it's not hijacked, but
No, I know.
it becomes secondary.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking with my head. It's more that heart. It's that gut
Yeah.
reaction. I don't know what it is, but there's like, ooh, you just have that oh moment.
Correct. You're being taken.
Yeah, being taken. I love
Exactly
it.
what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And and you're making me think about another thing that I've challenged myself to do, that I'm going to put out here to challenge others, which is, in social media, which is the platform, for better, for
Yep.
worse, that most of us
Yep.
are sharing our images and getting some sort of feedback loop. Rather than, if I like an image, or if I love an image, whatever my reaction is to it, I'm really trying when I comment to say, this is what I like about it, or this is what drew me in, not just a generic, like, this is gorgeous, or this is
Right.
beautiful, to try to give it that next level, sit with it a second longer, give it that thought and say, okay, what is it that draws me to this? And I wish we would do that more. Honestly, I wish I had more comments like that. I wish other people would do that on other folks, because it's like it's exercising that muscle of training us to be a little bit more reflective and thoughtful about what we're pointing our camera at, and
Yeah.
what makes our heart sing.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. There was a time when I was doing on Instagram a bunch of reels quite frequently. And one of them was about that. Why don't we, when we're looking, especially as photographers, if we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at others' work, why are we not spending a little bit more time than a millisecond to
Right.
put a heart on it or say nice, right? And I'm
Yep.
guilty. I'm not going to lie,
Yep.
I'm
Same.
guilty,
I
but
do it too.
I do try to share images I love, to give
Hmm.
exposure to others.
Hmm.
And I do try, when I catch myself, to say something more than nice, beautiful, because
Right.
it's not really helpful. And social media is another whole conundrum. I don't know. I'm in a down spiral on social media, not as attentive as I've been in the past, just because it gets a little overwhelming sometimes to have to keep up
Yes.
with everybody.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's um it's a love hate, and
Yes.
I don't even know if sometimes it's a love. It's a hate tolerate, there's a whole spectrum of emotions
I agree.
that go with it. So yeah, I hear you, and thank you for that. And that's one way that I am so appreciative of you, because you shared my Instagram feed in your newsletter. And
Yep.
I remember opening up the newsletter and seeing that and being like, wow, that is so cool. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So
Yeah.
it was such a lovely surprise. And so doing that for me, doing that for others, it's such a gift. And I think that that's part of why it's important to give that more substantial reflection, because it's part of how we're supporting each other, and reminding us this is not a competition. This is it's a community.
Absolutely. And it should be a supportive, loving
Hmm.
community. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. We get enough hate in other places.
No kidding.
So, well, I want to turn to that question I alluded to a moment ago. That was that focus of the panel conversation of photographer or photographer. Listen to me,
I know what you meant.
photographer, photographer versus, not even versus maybe, but photographer and or artist. Maybe I'll put it that way. And who decides what someone is? So could you say a little bit about where you're at with that particular question?
Yeah, that's one that I'm still wrestling with. And that is a conversation that Brooks and Cole and I had for an out of Chicago panel discussion. So all I can speak to is where I'm at in that journey right now. So I think it is a journey, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I started, there was a need to have to learn the craft and the creative side of photography, depth of field, and what does an f-stop mean, and how do I get something near and far in focus, and things like that, and composition, and what is a more pleasing composition, and so forth. So early on, I was just a practitioner that happened to use a camera and learning all those controls on a camera. But then the shift, I think, for photography came with Nancy Rotenberg, who was my mentor, who we
Mm-hmm.
lost back in 2011 to cancer.
Mm.
But she was brilliant, and a psychologist in a former lifetime, one who celebrated the heart in photography all the time. And that's where I get that, I'm sure, was from Nancy. And so to me, I had to learn the technical, the craft side. And then Nancy came along and said, but John, where's this? And so I
Mm.
needed to think about that more deeply than I'd ever done before. Well, maybe I'd never thought about it before. I was a snapshot shooter with a camera, right? Nothing wrong with that, by the way. There's
Sure.
zero judgment in any of this journey on anybody, because it's a journey that everybody's going to have to go through. But then
Mm-hmm.
Nancy started to help me see that. And then my dear friend Dan Sniffen, who I lost 2 years ago, he kind of helped me marry the two of those things together. And Tony Sweet had a major role in all of this too. He was a great mentor early on, kind of in the same period and I consider Tony to be a guy who uses a camera for art. Absolutely. To me,
Mm-hmm.
he's an artist with a camera. So having his influence, having Dan's influence, tying that all together, finally got me to a place where I started to not think about the gear near as much. So that phase it's all about the gear. It's all about taking proper exposures. And it was all in here, right? As a photographer, it was all in my head, and I wasn't here at all in my heart. And so that transition came when I finally learned and quite honestly, got really cemented back in 2015-ish when I met my dear friend Flint Sparks, who we do the contemplative photography retreat in Molokai, right? And
Mm-hmm.
really helping me to understand how how do I show up as a photographer? What do I bring to the act of photography? And how can I slather myself all over the camera and I love the music analogies. When you think about,
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan and all these great guitarist players that I adore, they were slathering their lives all over their guitar strings. Kurt Cobain, his music, his
Mm-hmm.
lyrics were all over in his wretched, difficult life was there. Well, we as artists, if we want to now pivot and become artists, need to do that same thing, I think, right? Start to slather our lives all over. And that's what Cole and I love to talk about. Vision is just recognizing what your life consists of, and so that you can now put that all over your artwork. And so to me, to get back to the question at hand, is artist or photographer. Photographer is more of a practitioner in my mind, with a camera in their hand, who's pressing buttons and trying to get things sharp. And they're here more than they're here. And
Mm-hmm.
then an artist is somebody, like a Cole Thompson or a Tony Sweet that I've mentioned before. Sarah Marino does some beautiful work that I love. Hubo is another black and white photographer. I just saw her stuff this morning. She blows me away with her great work. And so I think those people, and hopefully me, and I'll answer
Yes,
that part of that in a second, is doing that. But so there's a second part of that you didn't ask that I'm going to go ahead and answer anyways.
Sure.
So are you an artist? And I think, Chuck Kimmerly has said to me, if you can't call yourself an artist, who can? Right. And
Yes.
I think that's an interesting point. But we were having a discussion about, what is fine art photography? And that one for me, I still answer as, that's up to you, Beth, to decide whether my work rises to the level of fine art. I think it's a bit much and pompous for me to say I'm a fine art photographer. I think, I can think of two images. One of them I sent to you of a glacial lake that I think rises up to a level of maybe a fine art black and white photography. But generally, I'm not going to do that. I think people might say they are because it separates you. Like I know Cole Thompson would say, he's a fine art black and white photographer, so that people don't think he's a portrait photographer or a wedding photographer. So he's just trying to put himself in this place, right? But I would hope that my work is rising up to artistic in some way, shape, or form, that it's not snapshots. But I'm uncomfortable saying I'm a fine art photographer or that I'm an artist. I still struggle with that a little bit, because I look at others' work, which can be dangerous, right? And I compare myself, and Teddy Roosevelt said, comparison is the thief of joy, right? Famous quote. Yep. And that's exactly what happens to me. I can fall into that trap quite easily, that I look at Hubo's work this morning and I'm like, that's fantastic. I don't have an image that looks like that. Yet I'm sure I do. It's just we're so critical of our own work. So anyways, as you'll learn here in this interview, I can be rather verbose. I'll stop talking.
As can I. This is a dangerous conversation. I've never used 5 words when 20 will do.
We'll get along fine.
That's right. Well, so many things were popping up as you were saying that, and as you shared that Teddy Roosevelt quote. Yeah, comparison is the thief of joy, and I think of another one when it comes to especially social media, and I think this is a point that you and Brooks and Cole touched on, which is highlights. The highlight images and what we see online. Like we only see the highlights. And that's another thing that can kind of steal our joy. And this quote that I'm thinking of comes from a gentleman named Stephen Furtick. And it's from back in the 80s, I think. And he says, the reason we suffer from insecurity is because we compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. And I thought, well, if that's not prescient for the social media age, I don't know what is. But I try to remember that. And I try to remember, like, I am just seeing what somebody has decided. This is my best of my best. And there, for every one that's awesome, there are probably, dozens, hundreds, thousands that should never, won't see the light of day because for whatever.
Yep. A quick story, if I could.
Yeah.
So Nancy Rothenberg, I mentioned, this is film days, right? And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
in my medical business at the time that I had, and I'm going out through Pittsburgh, and I called Nancy and said, "Hey, I'm going to be going through Pittsburgh on my way. Can I come over and take you and Michael to dinner?" "No, you can come and you can stay at our house and I'll cook you dinner." Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that was great. And here I am going with my hero. I mean, I held her on a
Mm.
pedestal this high at that time. I was a very inadequate photographer at the time. I was learning. I was new. She was my mentor. And I thought, this is so cool. I'm going to go to my mentor's house. It's awesome. So she lets me come into her inner sanctum where all her photography is. She's got a light table that's huge, big light table, and it's full of slides. And next to the light table is a wastebasket. And the wastebasket,
Oh.
it's huge. It's a big wastebasket. It's full of slides. And I kid you not, this is what I said to her. I said, "Nancy, you take bad pictures?" That's exactly what she did. She laughed out loud. She says, "Oh
uh,
my gosh, way more than I take good pictures." And that
yeah.
was a shift for me. I was like, holy cow.
Yes.
I thought, because all I'd ever seen prior to that was her slideshows at workshops that she would
Yeah.
show. And I was blown away. I mean, every single image is extraordinary. And I thought that's what every image she did. And so you're exactly right. And that's what we do. We look at somebody's grid on Instagram and we say, "Oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, these guys are fabulous." But Cole and I have talked about in our show, 1 out of 1,000 sometimes. That's
Right.
about what
Right.
the hit ratio is. I mean, it's not a lot. It's a process. And that's
Yes.
what's critical, that everybody understands. There's a process we all go through.
Yeah.
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 I wish I could take more keepers.
Right, right. And that shift for me, and I feel like sometimes my interviews here are like ads for Out of Chicago. But it was my
Yes.
it was my first Out of Chicago conference live. It was at Chicago Botanic Garden, and Anne Belmont was giving a
Love her.
beautiful presentation in the evening, and she was kind of preparing us for the workshop ahead. And the shift happened when she said, "You might only come out of here of these 3 days of photographing with like 5 images that you love, or five, and
Mhm.
and that's okay." And I was like, "Really?" Like, you come in with these expectations, like, I'm going to come home with like, hundreds
Yeah.
of images that are just kick ass,
Mhm. Yeah.
there was such a relief, to think, oh yeah. And I think for me, that was the start of me being, uh, and I hope this doesn't sound like a negative thing, but being more discerning. Like, I started looking at my work and getting a little bit more nuanced with it.
I don't think that's no. I think that's right on the money. I think that's part of that progress that we're making, is that you learned that you were just
Hmm.
happy and go lucky, and now you're
Hmm.
slowing down just a bit to
Yeah.
say, does this really work?
Right.
Because
Right.
I think the process, to talk more about that for a second, we want, or my invitation is people, is be incredibly present during that process so that you're slathering yourself all over your images.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then the opposite, I think the opposite sort of happens when we're being critical of the images that we now want to share. Now we
Hmm.
need to remove ourselves from that incredibly emotional connection and be a little bit more, your word, discerning about, okay,
Hmm.
do I love this because of the moment that I had, and Larry or Susie was next to me and it was a great celebration and wow moment, or is this really a good image that I want to share with the world? And
Yeah.
that's a little different process than in the moment when we're making that image, I think.
Yeah. And so that when you do a lot of workshops and out in the field and that sort of thing, and you probably come home or end the day with a lot of images, if you
Mhm.
have time to be taking them and whatnot, or if you're going out for yourself and
Yep.
not in a teaching situation. When do you look at those images?
I'm a film shooter at heart, right? I did that for a
Ah.
long time. So I do not download every day. I just
Hmm.
don't. I don't want to. Every once in a while, there's an exception where something really, well, I mean, just filled my heart with joy, and I
Yeah.
can't wait to see that. But I mean, that's a rare once a year type of moment, or twice a year.
Hmm.
in general, I don't do anything until I get home, download images, and then start to look at them.
Yeah.
And here's why. It's with great intention. It's because I want to continue to be connected to the experience. I don't want to be sidetracked by that whole headspace of being, okay, I got to plug in the drive. I got to do this. I got to download the images. Okay. That gets me out of that space of being present in the moments, being with customers or on my own shooting, where I'm just totally engaged in the process. And that's what film did, right? We didn't see them for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And when we were together on a workshop, we didn't show each other images on our phone, or, we didn't do any of that stuff. We talked about the experiences that we're having in the field. And I think that's much more beneficial than downloading the image. Now, some would argue, and it's fair, but downloading, I can see what my mistakes were. I can review, and I can maybe fix it tomorrow. And I get that. And we're back to my comment before. We're all at a different place in this journey. So if you need to do that, we all operate differently. That's just me. I don't want to anymore. I want to wait till I get home.
You're making me think about a trip I took to Las Vegas and Death Valley a few months ago. And I wanted to travel light. So I decided not to take my laptop. Mm-hmm. And I knew that meant I would not be able to look at my images until I got home, like 3 days later. And it was actually a really good exercise, because what was interesting to me is I really enjoyed my time in the park. I had some frustrations of different kinds. I worked through them. I found different things. I found different things that sparked joy, and enjoyed that. And then when I got home, I was surprised at the number of images that I was like, oh, I remember being excited about seeing that, but I'm looking at it now and I'm like,
Yeah.
It was about the experience. And so, that's not to judge the image and say, oh, that's a bad image. It's just to say, okay, that image was about the moment I saw that and decided to capture it and what I felt. And so it became, like you're saying, and I hadn't thought about it this way, it became about like honoring the experience of being there and seeing, sort of apart from the product, I guess, that came later.
Right. Because great images come from connected experiences, not from better gear.
Right.
Not from a better laptop software.
Are you sure? You're blowing my chances of justifying an upgrade.
Oh, I'm sorry. Unless you need to upgrade and you need permission, you tell your husband I've said it's important to have that new M3 Pro Max, whatever. Yes.
The M2 or M1 or whatever it is I have is just totally inadequate. Just completely. Your expression, slather yourself. I think about how much vulnerability is with that.
Oh yeah.
And so what's, I don't know. I don't know what my question is around that, or if it's a question or just a reflection, and anything come up for you when you think about that aspect of inserting yourself.
I think you've nailed it. It's a vulnerable thing to do. It's number one, it takes introspection. And that's not something everybody wants to do. I mean, I'm not ashamed at all to admit I've been through on and off with a therapist for 12 years, dealing with different things. And that allows you to take a deep dive into who you are as a human being, and hopefully better yourself and understand yourself and be able to communicate better with those that you love or what have you, right?
Yeah.
But I can tell you that one of those shifts was, like I said before, especially with Flint, finally helping me understand and answer that question, what are you bringing to the act of photography? Well, you're bringing you. So then how do I then make that happen? Well, I start to have to understand what are my joys and what are my loves, or what are my passions, or what are the things that drive me crazy? What are the things that make me angry, happy, whatever it is, all those things. And then find out how is that influencing or coloring what I'm taken by? And then how do I portray that in how I choose to both capture that and then process that, right? And now I wish I could share the images now and call this up, but I'll tell you quickly. There was an image I took at an old abandoned facility. And it was done with early HDR, so it was very gaudy, grungy, and sort of happy looking. Somebody told me, though, who I was with, that what happened there was horrific atrocities perpetrated on the children who were castaway children because they had deformities or mental health issues that families didn't want them. And then all of the people at that institution abused them to the point of death on occasion and then buried them out back. So now I learned this. Well, guess what happened? My feelings changed. My whole impression of what happened, I was mortified. I had rage. I had anger. Because I, unfortunately, part of my 12 years is dealing with some of those types of issues. And so the point is, I went back. Number one, I've never shared those images. To me, it was sacrilegious to do it. It would not make sense because of what happened there. But I show one image just to show that when I learned that new information, okay, so now go back to vision. My vision is now being influenced and informed and colored very differently because of new knowledge. I went back and reprocessed that to this very dark, very moody, very intense image that was no joy. None of that was in there because my information had changed. And so my life now was being slathered all over that image because of my own history that now was tweaked because of learning what happened to these poor innocent children and feeling rage, because of not anger, rage. I mean, it was, I was so
visceral.
Angry. So, as I say, when I use that example, does that happen with a tree? And no, of course not. It's not going to be that visceral. But let's take a tree. When I was photographing with my dear friend Dan one time, he was photographing dead trees. And finally, and this is the point of this for those listening, this is all I'm asking you to do is step back now and say, and notice in your Lightroom catalog, my gosh, this last year I have photographed dead trees. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
And so Dan stopped and through tears streaming down his face, he realized that he was now coming up on 80 years old, and he was an old tree losing his leaves, becoming a bare, fragile tree. And it was all about his aging and pending death potentially, right? Freeman Patterson, one of my all-time absolute favorite humans and brilliant photographers, was photographing, and I wish I could remember what the end of what this was, but photographing round stones, round everything, round. And all I remember is as he started to think about that, it took him back to his childhood. And I can't remember, which is going to ruin the story terribly, but it'll cause you to go look up Freeman Patterson and hear him tell the story. But, same thing. He figured out what in his childhood was connecting. And that's all I'm asking for. Every image I make is my vision slathered all over it. No, sometimes I'm just operating out of being taken and my heart gets all involved and I make images. Sometimes it's later that I figure out, that's why that image was dark, or that's why that was happy, or that's why it was so minimal, or what have you to express what was happening.
Yeah. To go to the music metaphors, I find myself often saying like resonance. There's something that it's like the tuning fork that goes and there's this vibrational, energetic exchange that is somehow that you can't always put words to. And you're like, I'm drawn to it. I don't know why. Taking that time to use art. I mean, in a way, we're almost talking about like art therapy,
Absolutely.
You're using art as a conduit to your own inner life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's there for us if we want it.
So it's interesting. So it's interesting, Beth. I mean, if we look at an artist with a paintbrush or whatever, right, that type of art where they start with a blank canvas, we can so easily understand their life connected to their art. And we can easily go to why do we struggle with that with photography? Why do we struggle with photography being art? I don't anymore at all. I just don't. It's different. It's just a different medium, but we're hopefully some of us are getting to that place where we are trying to express more artistic vision through our work.
Mm-hmm.
And why can't we be part of that process? Why can't we be slathered all over the pixels that we're capturing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to, before we get to the pixels, the pivot pixels,
Ah,
I do want to touch on something. There's this oft repeated phrase that I move in and out of peace with, which
ah,
is the only person you need to please with your work is yourself.
hmm,
And it occurred to me just yesterday, as I was thinking about this, that I hear that from established photographers, right? I don't necessarily hear it from somebody who's earlier in their journey, because it feels like earlier in our journey, we are concerned about what other people think. Like that's part of our feedback loop, and intellectually, I get it. I totally understand what that intention and the reality of that phrase, the only person that
mm-hmm.
matters is yourself. It feels like there's an and there somewhere. And I get kind of lost in that. So I'm wondering if you could help me out with this piece of reconciling that human need that we have to be
Mm-hmm.
seen and heard,
Mm-hmm.
appreciated, celebrated, whatever that is. Like we just want some sort of baseline acknowledgement.
Yep.
And also saying, but I don't care. That like getting to that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So I'll stop talking because I'm curious what your thoughts are.
No, and I think you're absolutely right. I think if you were to hear anybody say that they really don't care, I think that's crazy, because I do
Yeah.
think it is a human, and I'm trying to remember, Flint out at our retreat talks about the basic human need, and he talks about it like Wi-Fi. It's constantly going out, and every millisecond, I mean, it's very frequently, it's sending out this signal saying, do you see me? Do you
Mm-hmm.
hear me? Am I valid? That's what we as
Yes.
human beings, that's you can't turn it off. It
Right.
is part of your humanness, and you're constantly saying, do you see me? Do you validate me? Do you hear me? So to say that we really don't care what others think. So I think really what people are saying when they say that is, and I agree with you, they're on that journey at a place now where they're confident in their skills, their
Mm-hmm.
compositional skills, their technical skills, the craft, all that feels comfortable. And so now they're at that place where they're photographing from their heart, they're
Mm-hmm.
creating from their heart, they've learned how to be taken. And now at that point, it really is about, if I don't like what I make, Beth, how
Mm-hmm.
can I possibly expect you to like it?
Right. Right.
So for me, if I post something, I love it. And the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, if it gets 150 likes, 1,000 likes, or five, at this point doesn't matter to me. It's interesting information. It tells me that,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that didn't resonate with a group. But as Brooks Jensen would say, you'll always find your crowd. You'll always find the people who love your art. So maybe only five loved it on that day, but I guarantee you, if you
Right.
posted it on a different day, and that's the conundrum of social media, a different crowd's going to find you. Or as you continue to be noticed for the type of work you do, a different crowd is going to start to follow you, and now they're going to get your work.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I can give you an answer that's going to reconcile all of this at all. I just don't, because it is hard to get rid of that humanness. But I think it's really critical that we stop worrying so much, because that gets back to the Roosevelt quote, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
isn't that
Yeah.
what we're doing? Is
Yep.
we're back in the comparison mode. We're allowing somebody to compare our work to others and saying that's neither good nor bad, or it is good or bad. And that's, to me, I don't like that skill. It's why I don't like competitions. How do we
Right.
compete with art? It's just somebody's opinion. And I find that to be incredibly destructive to a
Mm.
person's joy and willingness to want to try to then put something out to the world. That takes courage to put images out to the world to view. And
Yeah.
man, when you give negative critical feedback, it just stomps on their creativity and doesn't allow them to flourish anymore. So I didn't do a very good job answering that one. Well, maybe you let it.
Well, I don't know if there's an answer, right?
Might not be.
It's something that we continue to debate within ourselves and might debate with each other and try to. It's just part. I think it's just part of being an artist, a creative person, is that we're always going to feel that tension between.
Yes.
This is me, and this is what brings me joy, and this resonates, and this makes my heart sing, and I do care about what other people think, but how do I not, I guess where I have landed with it is, how do I not lead with that? I don't want to ever look at my images and say, other people are going to like this. I want to say, I like this. I hope other people like it.
Yep.
I hope it resonates with somebody, because that, for me, I do have to acknowledge, like, part of the reason if I create something, I do feel that need to share it. And part of it for me is that I hope it brings someone else joy or makes their heart sing. That's just an undeniable part of the equation for me.
I think so. Otherwise, why would we share it?
Exactly. It would just sit on our hard drive,
Right.
Yeah.
Although there are those people too. Vivian Maier comes to mind. All that stuff was never shown.
Exactly.
So she truly did it for the love of doing it with no interest. That's an interesting case study, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. I learned about that one. I think it was Alex Kilby and the photographic eye. He did a whole episode on her and the discovery of all those
incredible
prints. It's just amazing. So, and I think that's, maybe that's it. I lead with the joy of the experience of being with my camera, being present to whatever is there. And then I lead with what are the outcomes from that experience that resonate with me. And then, if you had to sort of do these circles out, then there's, okay, I hope that, or it'd be nice, or, whatever. We're trying to release expectations, but say, I hope that this resonates with someone.
Here's an idea. Maybe this will help both of us.
Okay.
Ultimately, isn't what our job is as an artist to bear witness?
Yes.
So if we realize then, if we lead with, I'm going to bear witness to the experience and the connection that I had in this moment in time, period. Yeah. And I love this image that bears witness to this moment in time. And now there's no expectation for how anybody's going to receive that. Right. It's just you're bearing witness.
Beautiful. I use that word. Yeah, no, I use that word when I'm have my coaching hat on. I say I'm a witness and a guide. And
excellent.
How, that seems to translate. So that's a gift. Thank you for offering that word. Well, let's move to your pivot pixels. Let's get some images up here. You had mentioned that there's some stories here. So I'm looking forward to seeing this.
So interesting, because you're mostly landscape and abstracts, but I had to put this in because it is a story I tell in one of my favorite lectures to do, Dream, Believe, Create. And the story goes like this. I was photographing Marley's father at a really tremendous gym called Front Street Gym in Philadelphia. And what you need to understand is the first 2 times I photographed that gym with Dalen, who had done some boxing there was not a single human being in that gym, which in retrospect is quite humorous. But there's a real reason for that. It's because I had FUD, fears, uncertainties, and doubts.
Exactly.
I'm a landscape photographer. Why on earth would I want to photograph a human being in this really cool, old, dilapidated gym? And on the 3rd trip in, Dalen comes all dressed up as a boxer, and he says, John, it makes no sense for you to be photographing a gym without a boxer in it. and it just didn't even dawn on me to put a person in there because I am not a people photographer. So why would I have a people ruin a perfectly good picture?
Right.
Right. I mean, I have a cool gym. And finally I photographed him and I started to get into it and I started to enjoy it. But then Marley, then this is back in 2009. This is an old photograph. There's three of them coming up here, but Marley was there, bored to tears with me photographing her dad acting as a boxer and getting these cool pictures. Well, she's sitting in this situation in an 18-wheeler truck tire. It's a huge truck tire that she's laying down in. There's two huge windows in this old factory building converted into a gym, cascading this incredible light. I'm sitting there with a camera with a 2.8 lens, 7200. I don't know that that's a good lens for portrait because I don't do portrait photography. But I sat for 10 minutes paralyzed because I'm thinking, what is it okay to cut her head off, her arms off? Where on her torso should I be? I'm so fudded out, fears, uncertainties, and doubts about. I decide I'm not going to take a picture because I don't know what I'm doing. And then I make this picture, and then if you'll slowly go through the next two here, then I realize, oh, that's pretty good. So I make that one, and then I say, oh my gosh, I love that. And then I make the next one, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I made a triptych of all three of these, and I gave it to Dalen and his wife. And the shift for me was so visceral. I went from realizing a couple things, that I was in the way. I was completely in the way of being taken by this magical moment that was right in front of me. Why? Because I was so stinking afraid of doing it wrong rather than just doing it. I had the skills. I knew how to compose. So what I learned was it doesn't matter if it's a tree, a rock, a sunrise, a sunset, Faroe Islands, death. It doesn't matter. It's still photography. You still organize the frame just like it's a sunset, just like it's a rock, just like it's a tree. And you connect the same way you always have. So this was a pivotal moment. And I walked away from that saying, you know what? I am a people photographer. I can do this. And I'm no longer afraid. And I went to Cuba and I photographed people there, and it became much easier because I realized I was in the way. I was the problem. And that was huge in a shift.
Yeah. That we tell ourselves a story about what we can and can't do and what we're good and what we're not good at. And what I hear is that seeing her made your heart sing, and you followed that to these just absolutely stunning images.
Took me 10 minutes to get over all of that horrible negative self-talk. But when I finally did it and then looked at the back of my LCD, I was like, oh my gosh, I think this is good. I still wasn't sure, but I love these images.
Yeah. They're absolutely stunning. And what stands out to me besides the beautiful light is her eyes. Just there's magic there that you've captured. And I bet these photos are cherished by her parents.
Well, this is on the island of Molokai at a wonderful beach that we get to go to. And oftentimes, because of the way the beach is set up, it kicks back a wave into an oncoming wave, and they collide and they create something that doesn't look like it should ever happen. It's a backwards wave, but that's because of the backwash so fierce and so much of it hitting that. And I use this image oftentimes to teach the idea that Nancy gave to me, Nancy Rotenberg again, this idea of blessed be the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. So another pivotal moment in my photography journey to learn from Nancy that, expectations and our intentions, sometimes aren't going to happen. The weather's not going to cooperate. We're not going to have fog where we want to have fog, where, the light's not going to be what we saw somebody else. Beth got great light down in the Smokies and I got terrible light, and so blessed be the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. Being again open to being taken, and that's what this image to me represents is that shift of realizing, once again, I'm in the way, all these expectations, and my intentions were good, but I let the expectation get in the way and then color the rest of that photo shoot, because that can
Yeah.
happen to me. Oh, shoot, no
Yes.
fog. And then you get in the car, go have breakfast rather than, well, what else can I be taken by? And sometimes that means putting down my camera
Mm-hmm.
and just being, not doing
Yeah.
anything photographically, but being and centering myself and getting back to being present.
Your sharing made me think of a variation on Teddy Roosevelt's
Huh.
quote, expectations are the thief of joy. Um,
Yes. Yes.
so this is a
Absolutely.
beautiful visual and powerful reminder about that
Yes.
flexibility that we need.
Yeah.
And when you think about this is not to get into comparison, but it's also, I think, part of our journey as we're reflecting on photos or images, stories that people are telling. What elevates an image in some way? Like what gives it a little bit of that um, spark? And I would venture to guess that if you heard the story behind the image, sometimes it would be something about how the moment didn't deliver what that person expected, and so they sat down, they put down the camera, they released expectations, and then they were present and were able to adapt to the environment. And that's when that unexpected thing happened that actually was better than
Yes.
whatever they could have imagined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Yes, Tuscany. And, if
Yeah.
you're there in the springtime in May, which is a great time to go, you might be blessed with fog, which is always nice. And again, I remember in my career, or in the journey, maybe is a better way to put it, I remember certain things had to be certain ways for me to want to even trip the shutter. I couldn't have this in the frame. I had to have this. And boy, has that changed for me, where this whole shift that we've talked about already previously about being more open to being taken. I
Mm-hmm.
might have previously said, gosh, too foggy. It's way too foggy. I mean, gosh, there's
Mm-hmm.
hardly any detail. I mean, that's where my head
Mm-hmm.
was years ago. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, now I look back on that, I'm like, how silly was that? I mean, fog is so helpful and wonderful and
Yes.
separates and creates mood. But I
Mm-hmm.
just am so embarrassed that there was a time when I was like, yeah, I don't know, kind of too foggy. I think I'm going to move on.
Yeah. Pack it up for the day.
Yeah. But now
No.
I'm like, look at you got that little wispy piece way in the top left there of another
Yes.
bunch of trees. Yeah, I mean, I love these. They're
Yeah.
so full of emotion.
Yeah, it's so atmospheric and it's
Yeah,
unexpected. Like I hesitated for a moment because the images that we usually see are the vivid greens and the yellows and
sure.
so this lends it a completely different perspective that's uniquely yours.
Yeah, I hope so.
Oh, and
What
there's a
else?
person there. So
Yes,
here on that cliff there. So what are we looking at here?
this is a place called Moomomi. It's
Mm-hmm.
on the island of Molokai. It's maybe one of the top three most spiritual places I've ever photographed.
Mm-hmm.
Molokai in general is a very spiritual place. There's a certain um, spirit that lives
Yeah.
there because of the Hawaiian people and the history of that island.
Mm-hmm.
And so not many people can go here because it is a preserve, and a land trust maintains it and bringing back some birds and so forth. So the only way you can get there is because you happen to know Ricky Cook, who owns the property that we do the retreats on, he and Bronwyn.
Mm-hmm.
And he happens to be on the board. And so he can get us in there with a special permission and permits and all those things. So it's an amazing location, but again, being a purist, whatever the heck that means, and I don't know what that means anymore, because people
Yeah.
call Ansel a purist. He was not a purist. He manipulated like crazy. But
Right.
I never wanted people in any of my photographs. I mean, why would you ruin a perfectly good landscape with a person?
Exactly. Exactly. I'm always like, they need to get out of my way. They're ruining my shot.
Yeah. But doesn't it give you great perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was a shift for me, is to realize that it's okay to have a person in a photograph. And as a matter of fact, sometimes it gives you sense of scale and perspective that
Yeah.
helps you understand just how massive or small or grand, a scene might be.
Yeah. Because without that person, I don't know that I could imagine different senses of scale here
Yes,
from almost, drone and this is huge, or this is almost a small
sure.
scene, if you zoom in. And the other
Yes,
thing that I think the person adds is story. I
yes.
look, it looks like it might be a woman. I don't know, but a person standing on that, like what took them there? What are they looking at? What are they thinking about?
What are they
Um,
pondering as they look
yeah.
and hear? You talk about all your senses being involved in a photograph, right? I mean, you're seeing
Yep.
things, you're hearing, because there's a lot of tumultuous waves in this area all the time. So it's very
Yep.
loud and can be scary, but it's, sunrise
Hmm.
light there. It's a magical moment to be there. And I'm sure that person is, bearing witness again, as we
Yes.
talked about, to this,
Yes.
to this moment of being in this sacred spiritual place at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find yourself when you go to museums, do you enjoy art that has people in it?
Yes, oh gosh, yes, absolutely. And
Mm,
yeah,
mm.
thank you for reminding me how silly I am. It took me a long time to put people into my, photographs, but it's totally fine if you're an artist and you paint them in. That's good.
Because I've always, when I go to a museum myself, I mean, I have to admit, I always thought it was maybe my introverted nature or, something, um, that it was more of a reflection of me that I would spend more time with, paintings that did not have people in them. Like,
Yeah,
so, and it's just like songs. I mean, this sounds kind of silly, but it's like if the song was a person's name or referred to a specific person,
yeah,
I was less enamored of it. Um, it would have to be like a
interesting.
really good song, but so this is again, this is part of like the art therapy. Like if I'm willing to kind of look in the mirror and say, what is it that is makes me I don't want to say resistant, but maybe it is resistant to
Yeah,
the human element in my photograph, in the art I
yeah.
enjoy, in the music I listen to.
I think it's a valid
Yeah.
thing to explore for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'll send you a check for the therapy session when
And
we're
I'll
when
send
we're
the
done
check
here.
right back to you for my therapy session.
Awesome, awesome. It's a deal. Barter exchange, right? Um, yeah. Now I think we have a few black and white images that have just
Yeah.
yeah, gorgeous mood. And I almost was going to say, oh, I think I see a person, but I don't think it's a person. I think it's just part of the
That's
rock.
called the witch's finger.
Oh, is it? Okay, so
Yeah,
so
the witch's
yeah.
finger. This is the Faroe Islands, where we'll
Mm,
be again in July. Cole Thompson and I do this together,
mm-hmm.
and I'll have a big story. I think some of the next images here are more images just that you can share with the group that might be
Yeah.
watching. But this is the Faroe Islands, and man, you talk of that. The clouds were screaming through there really fast, creating that incredible drama. And then I love the cloud shadows in the water too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Gorgeous.
So I mentioned earlier on that I might have one or two images that possibly rise up to, fine art. And this would
Mm-hmm.
be number one on my list, of a beautiful glacier lake in the South Island of New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were there with the group, and it's just, to me, it had to be in a 4x5 format, because I don't know why, but 4x5, 4x5 view cameras, it felt like that was a format that felt fine arty. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I did. I had that in mind as I was capturing it. This is an interesting story from a processing standpoint. I could not make those background hills look that contrasty black and white, the mountains, I guess, until I met Cole Thompson, and he taught me
Mm.
how to do the dodging and burning that he does. And that allowed me to go back and work on this image a few years later after making this. I didn't meet him until after I'd made this image, and finally was able to achieve my vision for how that was looked when I made it and how I wanted it to look and feel, when I had those tools. So I guess
Yeah.
if we wanted to do, a pixel shift, type of moment,
Mm-hmm.
that certainly happened with this, that I realized I needed to learn new technique. And when I had that technique, I could go back. And I don't know about you, Beth, but that's happening more and more with the
Yes.
new AI tools to remove things. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not a fan of adding anything with AI. That's not something I'm interested in. But I do
Same.
use the AI technology, especially for removing or cloning
Yeah.
or adding canvas, maybe because I missed a little bit. I'm fine with all that.
Yeah.
Um, but I go
Yeah.
back now and I look at things because I have new knowledge and new understanding of processing that allows me to achieve the vision I had initially.
Yay. Yeah. Oh, I love hearing that, because that's maybe, I think you've had that awareness longer than I have, because I've just come to an awareness like, oh, sometimes my eye and what I captured, it's the processing and my skill for processing it, probably more likely my skill than the actual technology,
Yeah.
hasn't caught up with that. And to if something in my gut says there's something there, I don't know what it is, I'm not sure what to do with it, but there's something there, like, don't delete it, just keep
No.
it,
Gosh, no.
and then come back later, because there's it seems like every time you turn around there's a new way of um, a new tool available. and
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so I love that you had that experience, because it's validating.
Yeah.
That it's like,
If
yeah.
you could see the raw file in this, you would want to
Oh
throw it
yeah.
away. It was a dreary,
Mm-hmm.
not great day, very gray sky, which again, a great point of that is there's no right or wrong time of the day to make photographs. We
Right.
get hung up on this, we name the light and call it great light, bad light. Stop doing that. Stop naming things and quantifying them. Just be open to what you're given and know
Mm-hmm.
that you can most likely do something with it, with the
Yeah,
processing tools, if that's what you want to do.
absolutely. And before we move on, in the spirit of sharing, like, why I love this image, or what really resonates with me, there's something about the clouds here in this center.
Uh-huh.
It makes me think. My gut reaction is like it's a spirit rising, like there's some uh,
Love it.
energy that's just doing this, blooming in some way. Um,
Love that.
so yeah, just
Thank
wanted to
you.
share. You're welcome. And oh, sand lines. Is this what I'm looking at?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I have a whole series of these, and Eric Bennett,
Yeah.
saw these, and he loved them so much he was mad at me, and that made me very happy
Well,
that
see,
Eric was.
right, right. So, so I have to say, this a little bit gets to, I think, Cole's point about photograph. I think he calls it photographic celibacy,
Correct. Yep.
where
Yep.
you refrain from looking at other people's work. And
Yep.
so, if you'll indulge me for just a moment, because this is just that perfect example of this. I was on an Amtrak train and going through Southwest Michigan, and something caught my
Mhm.
eye out the window. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what it was, but I just thought I should pull out my camera and just
Okay.
snap, as we're traveling along at however fast we're going. And a lot of the images, it's like, meh, but a quartet of them stood out to me because of the power lines. I was like,
Oh.
wow, the power lines are so dominant, and they happen to be like compositionally pleasing photos to
Hmm.
me. And I just thought, wow, why we're in a wireless world, and look at these
Interesting.
power
I
lines
like that.
everywhere, dominating. And so I posted them on Facebook, and I just said, I was really captivated by these, they tell this story and whatnot. And somebody commented, they said, oh, this reminds me of Cole Thompson's Power Line series,
Yeah.
which I was not familiar with.
Oh,
And
good.
and I said, oh, I should go look, or should I,
Yeah.
And so I actually did go and look. And it's interesting because this happens to me otherwise. And this happens to me with the sand lines, because I have thought about, every time I go down to the beach, I'm like, I have got to capture these. It's a series, line in the sand, and how they mimic landscape, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And And I can fall guilty to this idea of I think of something, I'm excited about it, and then I find somebody else has done it, and I'm like, damn it.
Right.
Right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, Cole's already done this. John's already done this. And so why would my voice need to be added to this? Like, it's been done.
Well,
So
that's
how
a
would you
fair
respond to that?
question. It's a fair question. And Cole would say he wouldn't do it. He absolutely wouldn't do it because and that's the reason he practices celibacy is he doesn't want, or maybe a better way to put it is he wants to do honest work.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love when he talks about that because then even if he's now doing the same thing that I've done or you've done,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have any influence and he wasn't triggered by something that he saw from somebody else. It was generally from his own vision and how he saw that. So I
Yeah.
think there's some merit to that because I'm at the
Mm-hmm.
place now when somebody shows images in a session in a workshop and I'm like, crap, I wish I didn't see that because
Right.
now I'm not sure. So my line is if we're on a workshop and somebody sees an image and they say, hey, John, look at this. There's no way in heck I'm ever going to make that image that they're showing me in especially during a tour, right?
Right.
But if I see something in Instagram in my scrolling through and it inspires me, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to go back to that location. But next time I see sand like this, for instance, I'm going to have
Mm-hmm.
no issues photographing it because I can add to that conversation
Mm-hmm.
honestly because I'm not at the
Mm-hmm.
same beach at the same moment in time that
Right.
Beth was. So
Yep.
that's where my line is. I'm fine taking inspiration and going out and using that, whereas Cole's not, and that's fine. And that's what works
Yeah.
for him, and it doesn't work for me. I'm okay getting inspired.
Yeah. And you're what you're saying is kind of inviting me, like I'm still thinking about my line in the sand, and all this, and I'm thinking, and mine would be different, right?
Yes, of
I would have a
course.
different processing. I might have a different perspective. There might be the seed of
Absolutely.
that idea, but there's nothing stopping me from continuing on my path of trying to um, manifest what my
Yep.
imagination was
Absolutely.
giving me. And I could look at it as validating, like, oh, okay, yeah. I mean, I don't feel like I needed the validation because I was excited about it, but
Hmm.
there's an extra data point, I suppose, that says,
Yes.
oh, yeah,
Yes.
make an effort, Beth, um,
Yes.
you know,
Do
don't
it.
be lazy. Just do it. Just do it, right?
Do it.
Don't let comparison steal the
Yes.
joy that you got
Absolutely.
from imagining that. And the contrast here is just amazing in that line. So,
Yeah, out in Death Valley. Well, actually,
yeah.
over the Alabama Hills at this point. Yes, over at the
Mm,
Alabama Hills in Lone Pine.
hmm.
And happened to be with Cole Thompson. We're doing some scouting that day. And that's what caught my eye. I mean, it's the contrast,
Yeah.
all the light just hitting that mid ground, the foreground's in shadow and the background's in shadow. And that's something that my
Hmm.
buddy Dan taught
Yeah.
me to see, especially out on the West Coast. A little harder to do sometimes on the East Coast because we've got all these trees. We're kind of blocked by a lot, but these big open expanses out west make it really a lot easier. But to see contrast and understand that contrast is a real valuable tool in composition. It really is.
Yeah.
It creates, to me, this is very bold and very striking,
Very
right?
graphic.
And
Yeah.
you were drawn exactly to what I wanted you to be drawn to, the contrast. And
Hmm.
that's what, to me, the subject here is contrast.
Exactly. Yeah, that was such another big aha. The subject isn't the actual landscape, the
Right.
the
Yep.
dirt and the rocks and whatever. It's the contrast. It's
Because
that
again, if you
gentle
do that,
swoop.
right. Sorry, I didn't mean
Sorry,
to
go ahead.
interrupt you. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, because if you think about if I stopped and thought, which I did, so what is it that I'm being attracted to here? It wasn't the
Hmm.
landscape. It was
Right.
light. It was the light play, and it was specifically the contrast of light. And so that's what I photographed. We're
Yeah.
back to a concrete example of what I was preaching early on in this discussion.
I guess I am curious a little bit about best worst advice that you've gotten or given.
Okay, so best worst advice. I think the best for sure is going back to something we really have covered already. The best advice is from Flint, hands down, and it's that
Hmm.
idea of being open to being taken, and what are you being taken by? And that, if there's one key pivotal moment in my journey, that's absolutely it. That
Yeah.
I'm way more present and way more open to being taken. I can't come up with a worse. Well, I know, no, I got one.
Yay.
The worst advice is people who are uninvited, were never asked, giving you advice about what you should
Yes.
do about your images. It drives me crazy. You put it up on social media, and somebody will say, why didn't you put the tree over there? Or how come you didn't put this in the power third? Do you realize that this is cut in half? I'm like, I don't remember asking your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But boy,
Mm-hmm.
people want to give opinions. So stop giving people opinions when they don't ask for them.
Yeah. Unsolicited advice. Oh,
Oh my gosh, I don't need
another
it.
thief of joy.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on you also are a musician and have that,
Yes.
that love of music. And I'm curious how, how and if there's an intersection between the visual expression side of yourself with the camera and you with a guitar or you as a musician. Like,
I
yeah,
think it's
how
a
do the,
great question. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad we got around to this one. So I've mentioned Tony Sweet before, a
mm-hmm,
brilliant jazz drummer.
mm.
Um, uh, Ansel Adams, concert pianist. I believe
I had
John
no
Sexton.
idea.
Yeah, I mean, Ansel was a brilliant pianist.
Wow.
I believe John Sexton, if I'm not mistaken, is a musician and a pianist as well. What I've
Mm-hmm,
learned over time, hanging around the folks that I'm blessed to be able to hang around with, a number of really good photographers happen to have a musical background.
mm-hmm,
So here's what I think translates. So as a musician, so I played a trumpet, baritone, horn, and tubas. I played in a Dixieland band professionally for a little while through the end of high school and after high school, playing around at local, the pub and the German tap, and we would play Dixieland music, and we just had a lot of fun. And so I was a reasonably good tuba player and a trumpet player, but now I play guitars and write sappy love songs for my wife, which she loves. So there's a discipline, right? So when
yes.
you're learning, let's go back to trumpet. I had to practice a half an hour every day. It was
Mm-hmm,
required by my parents who were paying for my lessons. And I had to practice scales as
yep.
well as learn the music. So I had to learn my instrument inside out and backwards so that muscle memory would just make the valves or the strings, or muscle memory playing chords on guitars, so that I didn't think about it. So it got out of the way of the creative process.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the gift of being a musician. We've been trained
Mm-hmm,
how to practice, how to learn our instruments inside and backwards, especially if you're going to do improv. When I was in the Dixieland band, and Jimmy Fryer, who still plays down at the Blue Note in New York City, he's a big deal to this day. When Jimmy would turn to me and say, "Take it," meaning my turn to take a solo,
right.
you can't go, okay, I got to play a G, and then I think after the G, I think I should play an A.
Mm-hmm,
No, you play
yeah.
right from here at that moment, and you're just feeling the groove of the
Right.
band at that time, and you're playing a solo that's going to be different that time than it is going to be the next time Jimmy says take it. It's all going to be different. That's incredibly good training to be creative with a camera. So I've
Yes.
learned my camera inside out and backwards, just like Jimmy taught me in music, so that the camera gets out of the way and I
Mm-hmm,
can now be totally in the space of being taken and now creating and being in that creative moment. So
yeah.
that's to me what music does for me.
Beautiful. I love that. And yeah, my instrument's clarinet. Years and years and years, masters in performance, right? And I don't play it now. And I say my camera is my instrument, and I try, it becomes that conduit for the creative expression. And the other thing that I think about is that music it's like a whole brain massage, right? I know that it's fallen out of favor maybe, or it's not necessarily scientifically correct to be thinking about left brain, right brain, and that sort of thing. But this idea that it calls on the analytical, the technical, the mathematical, and it calls on kind of letting some of that go, learning that to the point
Yes.
where you've got unconscious competence.
Yep.
So that the imaginative piece, the interpretive piece, the heart of it can come out. And when you get those two things together, I'm sure that there's lots of endorphins and other happy,
Yes.
hormones and chemicals being released. And I think that I don't know that I thought about it the same way, but it's like when what you're describing in terms of your relationship with your camera strikes me as a similar thing. Like you get comfortable with it. The technical part does not interfere. You're confident with it, and it allows your whole brain to be engaged with an activity.
Well said. Yep. I agree 100%.
Yeah. And it is amazing how many artists, and I find, like I said, my other hat is as a professional coach, tons of coaches that are artists. And in this case, often painters or photographers. I noticed that.
Oh, DeWitt Jones?
DeWitt Jones, yes.
Yeah.
He did I don't even know, an educational video, I guess, talking about sort of the metaphor of photography and seeing. And I watched that video one of the first days of my coach training back in 2008.
Yeah.
And that metaphor that particular video had a pretty big impact, I think, and still does today on how I see.
He's an extraordinary man and a gifted photographer, a great speaker. I'll just say, people listening, go look at his TED Talk called Celebrate What's Right with the World. It's 18 minutes that'll transform your life. And it's basically a small version of the video that you're talking about. I was introduced to DeWitt with that identical video that you're talking about that you saw back in 2008. And to think that now he's a friend of mine is just mind-boggling, because when I saw that in 2008, I mean, he, again, was a superstar, and he is a superstar. Yeah. And now I get to teach with him is quite a privilege and an honor, because he's an amazing man.
Yeah. Well, superstars attract superstars. So you are, he's in good company with you.
Well, that's very kind.
And vice versa. So, any parting words that have come up that you would like to leave folks with as we wrap our conversation?
No, well, number one, a thank you. This has been a lovely dialogue and a lovely discussion. Thank you so much, Beth. Again, it's what I anticipated, knowing you the little bit that I know, knowing your incredible, beautiful work, and seeing some of your videos. I'm excited for where this will go, and I'll do my best to make sure others find out about this, because the discussions that you're having and the people you're having are really important, I think. And it's the stuff that I like to talk about. So my final parting word is what I'm going to say to almost anybody that I'm with. Learn to photograph what makes your heart sing. Learn to engage this part of you. Learn all that technical stuff that we just talked about. It's really important, but learn it to the point where it gets out of the way of your ability to engage your heart in the process of creating images or receiving those images, as I like to say, and being taken by things. So we've hit it probably 3 or 4 times. Sometimes redundancy, especially for old people like me, is really important.
Elders.
Elders. Wise elders need to hear these things over and over again. So go out and share those images on social media so I get to see them, and let's connect and support and love each other. That would be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. It's been welcome. A true honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Let us know in the comments what was most useful or meaningful to you, and be sure to subscribe so that you're notified of future episodes. This channel is made possible in part by Nature Photography classes and their Inspired Creator Grant. You can learn more or submit your own application at naturephotographyclasses.com/inspiredcreator. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.